are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. All right, we are here with Matt Brooks. Matt Brooks is here with us. It's going to go both ways on this podcast. Really excited to talk about this one. We gave it to you all in the intro about what's going on. Obviously, Matt, from his listeners, are going to know one of the best minds, if not the best mind, covering the Nets full time right now. We're really happy to be talking to him and thought it'd be like a good way to just sort of trade around ideas of what's happening with the Kyrie Irving situation now, among other things. Buddy, how's it going?
I'm good. Yeah. I mean, you guys have done an incredible job with your podcast, just kind of detailing this Kyrie Irving situation in a way that I was frankly jealous. I was like, wow, they have handled this with way more eloquence than I have. I've just been, kind of hacking away at this the best I can. So I thought it would be good for us to come together since we've been pretty on top of this. I think all of us.
Yeah, so it's a situation that's complex. It's like it's simultaneously really simple and pretty complex, like sort of all at the same time. And I guess, the way Adam and I have talked about it up until this point is mostly about from the Nets media arm and are using sort of the media, it seems like, to try to send a message to Kyrie Irving at this point that maybe internal dialogue has either failed to do or was unable to start, or, that's just all conjecture. Like we're just kind of guessing at that piece. Have you gotten that sense from the things that you've seen over the last couple of days, the side quotes, the Woj piece with Windhorst, what's been said to Brian Lewis at times? I mean, there's like a lot of stuff out there now. It seems clear as day to me, but I don't know if we and Adam and I have sort of overstated it maybe.
Yeah. I mean, so first off, I have been a little skeptical because of how much they were, like when I was at media day, all of the answers were the same, which kind of made me like my hair stand up a little bit. Oh, we're not worried. We're not worried. It was just the same answer across the board. And it was said in such a way where it just didn't feel genuine, in a sense. So that was when I started to be on pins and needles a little bit. It's like, it's like when you get, let's say, somebody, they get dumped and they're like, no. I dumped them. It was like that kind of an energy. It was a weird vibe there. The side comments were like where the alarms really started going off for me. That was where,
it's interesting because when you said about we initially, and it's like going back to last year with things that went on with Kyrie, where you basically say, hey, he's away from the team. You get all the boilerplate responses. He comes back. You really don't get any deep explanation about what went on. And now he's back with the team and it's fine. So the initial part of that wave of media day of being like, yeah, that's what's happening. Doug and I had the same reaction to the Joseph Tsai piece. Like that was, hey, here's a dude that doesn't really get involved. Sean Marks handles what the team is thinking or how those interactions are going. You'll ask Steve Nash those questions, but as soon as Joseph Tsai kind of put his voice into the conversation, it made it feel very much like, here's this next level up. I mean, the highest level you can go, but here is the owner saying, well, I'm kind of fed up with this. Like I have a very clear expectation about why I've invested so much money into this franchise is to win championships. And it's not to have to deal with this, especially just as the season is about to kick off.
Yeah. I thought the wording of or whatever he said along the lines of it's his personal decision. He very much wanted to make it clear that was not what the team was with. That was not what he was with. And that was kind of where I read that quote. And I did like a double take. I had to read it again because for the most part, Joe Tsai's been pretty in the background, and he hasn't really come out and said anything. And this Kyrie situation was just sort of hanging over everything, but it was to a degree in the background. You got all these other players being much more vocal about their stance on vaccination. Kyrie just sort of said there's a plan. It's going to happen at some point, and it sort of just died down. And then those Joe Tsai quotes came out, and that's when I was thinking, okay, there's something else here. Like there is something that isn't fully right. And everything we've gotten since then is kind of confirmed that.
Have because you've been covering the team for a while, obviously those that are, I'm sure everyone listening to the podcast knows Matt and has read Matt's stuff, but just to give a quick background, like Matt has locker room access to, and has been like on the media side of covering the Nets here for a while now. Have you seen because Adam and I didn't think we had you seen when the Adrian Wojnarowski, Brian Windhorst story came out the other day with the very specific wording? We detailed this on yesterday's podcast, so I'm not going to go back through all the quotes, but had you really seen the Nets? It feels like that's not the kind of story that's often I sometimes call like Woj, like the 33rd. I'm retreading this. Someone else came out, the 33rd franchise, right? Like they're like he and Shams at this point of the 33rd team, and they kind of just get in the mix and all this stuff. Had you ever seen anything like that come out of the Nets where it was so? I mean, and do you agree with this statement also? It's like a two-parter. Do you agree that statement that was a very cleverly crafted plant to those guys about what they wanted the Nets message to be?
Yeah, I mean, I just never seen the Nets, like, to put it bluntly, leak like that. Like, they just have never sent a message that way with media. Usually these things get handled behind closed doors. You think of the absence last year. I'll tell you right now, there were very serious conversations last year when Kyrie was taking his absence that were, I think, in the same ballpark as what we're dealing with right now, but they were kind of done behind closed doors. This is way different. You can tell right now there is a breach of communication, because the only reason they would do this and go to Woj or whoever and leak essentially and say, here's our message, if you cannot get that message to the person you're trying to send it to. That's my read on this situation, at least, because everything before was handled behind closed doors. And I'm talking about the absence last year. So that was what kind of, I mean, at this point, I was already kind of suspicious from the Joe Tsai thing. That piece came out and I was like, okay, there's something off here. And everything that I've kind of heard has been, the communication has been like really not there right now, like not there. So, and that includes from ownership, that includes from management. I think that's even player to player. And it's just sort of like this thing that's hanging over them.
Well, there was a Harden quote that came out today, and I feel bad. I'll put who sourced it in the notes. It might have been Alex Schiffer from the Athletic, but he had said that he had asked Harden about it, and Harden basically said at the tail end of that he hadn't talked to Kyrie about it, which speaks to what you just said about the player-to-player communication that I think sometimes people assume is happening, and that actually might not be happening, because I think there's an assumption sometimes that that's happening. I want to go back to real quick about what you said something about last year. Do you think, having covered the team for a long time, do you think the situation last year where you said it was like really tight-lipped and no one was really saying much about it and still sort of a mystery about why he sat for that extended period of time, or at least it's a mystery in the sense that it hasn't been officially, I don't think, ever confirmed about what happened.
Yeah.
Do you think that situation has eroded the patience around this situation? Like, do you think those are independent of each other? And I'm just only asking your guess. Like, you don't need to have sourced this. Like do you think that situation has helped to erode? Like, has helped? It's like sometimes with my kids, I'll say, I don't think either of you guys have young kids, but I'll say to my kids, my patience level is now at 0. Like the morning has brought it down to 0. So I have no more patience to deal with this. I might, if this was the first thing, I would have had more patience, but that is now, my gas tank is dry. And so do you think that has sort of, like, do you think the situation would be different without that one? Or do you think they're sort of independent of each other at this point?
Could be, but I also think a large part of it is just like there are legal ramifications where he literally cannot play games in the Barclays Center, 41 of them, and maybe more depending upon what changes over the next couple of months. And I think that's the motivator. Like at least with the hiatus, the idea was, hey, let's give this guy his time and we're going to have faith that he's going to come back. Like this is a personal view, right? This is something that he personally believes in. And they're making it very clear, like, look, if you want to have this personal view, go ahead, but you basically can't be a part of what we're doing here. I mean, and so I think that's the difference, is that, I'm sure there is some human component of that, of just being a little bit worn down by this entire process happening once every 8 months. But I think moreover is just the idea that there's no like solution there. It's like he has to do something that's going to challenge his personal views in a sense.
So there's two parts there then, because going back to media day and then Kyrie being available via Zoom to have those conversations, we had talked about it previously where Kyrie seemed to reference this idea of, one, going to keep it personal, going to keep it private, and go forward with the plan that we have in place. It seemed like he was referencing an internal understanding about what his intentions were going forward. Do you think that the final straw of having the Brian Lewis interview that gives you Joseph Tsai's perspective on things, was that the follow-up to a pivot from Kyrie Irving in terms of what they may have been discussing behind closed doors? Because it seems, even going back to last year, it seems counterintuitive to think that there's been communication and it looks like it's going to go a different direction than what we were able to get through last year. Beyond saying a lack of direct dialogue between the two of them, doesn't it would seem counterintuitive that the Nets didn't talk directly with Kyrie before they got to this place, at least having Kyrie give them some indication of what his intention was. And now it's changed. And that's why the Nets are taking a much different tact here, as opposed to last season, as opposed to any point over the offseason, as opposed to any of the number of times that Kyrie has been a on or off the court. I'm going to label it as issue, but we get the perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think like the thing for me is the planning, the plan that was mentioned on media day. I'm still curious what that plan is. And are the Nets privy to that plan? Do they know the plan? Or is this a Kyrie plan? Because I don't know.
I got a plan, guys.
It sure doesn't seem like it. Even the KD quotes we got yesterday kind of saying, maybe I'm naive. Like we're at the point where, this is such a calculated team with their media appearances. Everything they say is coordinated. You saw it at media day. Everybody's saying the same thing. And now these little things are going to start to slip out. And you have the Woj article that you just like never see from the Nets. That one felt like it was ripped right from like the Colangelo era Sixers. Like it made no sense to see that from the Nets. So part of me is like, I don't know if these are moments of honesty or if these are like, hey, we're trying to subtly jab and be like, it's funny to say jab. That was funny. But yeah, like, sort of subtly mention to him, this is where we're at.
So we had,
court, buddy.
Yeah, we had discussed that idea of, you can try to send Kyrie a message. There's no guarantee that he's perceiving or receiving those messages based on his personality sometimes. So it's like the normal tactics about sending a message to a player may not be as effective in this particular instance. All right, going to get right back into that conversation with Matt Brooks. But first, got to tell you about our fantasy experts over at Sleeper. Back in 2018, they took a look at that fantasy basketball landscape and just said this thing is broken. And that's why in 2020, they launched the exclusively available on Sleeper Game Picks. What does that mean? It means instead of having to deal with this, setting your lineup and checking the schedule to see if there's more games for your opponent than you have, so you're actually going to start a weaker player, but he's going to get you a bigger stat line, why work with the headaches? When you go over to the Sleeper app that you can download right now, you'll be able to set and create your own Game Picks league where you set one starter for each position per week. Pick the game that you want the most for them so you get the best value. It brings the strategy back into fantasy basketball without all that guesswork and really a little bit of fugazi, if we want to be honest. You can head over to the Sleeper app right now. You will not be disappointed. You can start a Game Picks league today. If you're done with all those headaches of the guessing and the wondering and the what ifs, and you think that you are the best fantasy basketball player, go ahead and execute it over on Sleeper, where they've got you covered. Start a league today with your friends. You're not going to be disappointed. But you mentioned Kevin Durant there. This is the other piece of it, right? We're now at a place here where, again, what Kevin Durant has said, couple it with James Harden's quote, the perception of we support our friend, and that's an individual category that Doug and I have kind of defined what that means in basketball terms, and we support our teammate. And then as we said on yesterday's podcast, the apex predator effect of I'm also here to get something done. So when you're hearing their responses, does it match up that they don't really have a lot of communication or understanding what Kyrie's intention is, that they maybe are not as supportive of whatever his plan may be for the season? And do you think that the extension is a loaded question, but the extension with Kevin Durant and the acquisition of James Harden is really what has afforded the Brooklyn Nets to take a very different position with Kyrie and issues that come up, because it's not nearly the same process of getting to a championship when you have another player that has very clearly been able to provide what you need in support of Durant.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at when Harden was traded for, and you can look at the timing. And if you don't think that Kyrie's absence and Harden being traded for was a coincidence, I mean, if you think that was a coincidence, you're naive. Like, I'm sorry, that happened because of the fact that Kyrie was absent for 2 weeks and had minimal communication with the team. And that's just sort of how that kind of transpired. And I think that's kind of the idea now. And what was your first question about the extensions?
Yeah, just you have the extension for Kevin Durant, but just where do you think that Kevin Durant and James Harden stand on Kyrie Irving? Because we always talk about how when guys say, that's my buddy, that's my friend, there's a difference between being buddies and friends within basketball terms and actually being friends or close with someone off the court. We're not gonna get in the weeds on what the relationship is, but the number one hierarchy is winning basketball games and championships, and then us being buddies off the court and whatever we like to get into in our free time, right? Like, do you think that this has created that division there as well? Because everybody, even beyond the stars, are there at the facility practicing, getting ready for the season, except for Kyrie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to come down to KD, I think, in a lot of ways, because I think him and Kyrie are legitimate friends. You have to remember, though, KD missed 2 full years of basketball. I think there's a lot that he wants to get accomplished at this stage of his career. And at some point, if this continues the way it is, there's going to be a question of, are you going to value your friendship with Kyrie, or are you going to have to make whatever moves you have to make? Because I think really it's going to be KD signing off. I would be shocked if, maybe Joe Tsai or Sean Marks makes a decision, but we know, I think we get it. This organization wants to make KD happy, and for good reason. He's, in my opinion, the best player in the world right now. You're going to do what you need to do to keep that guy happy. I will say this, I also think I would be really shocked. I know KD's kind of said he hasn't really talked to Kyrie about vaccination or his whatever, gone over, sort of that idea and talked about it at the very least. I don't believe that at all. I don't. I think that's has to be something that they have discussed. I feel pretty good about that. So, it's just kind of my read on the situation right now is that this is going to sound bad. Everybody is hoping that Kyrie gets vaccinated on his own accord and is able to do whatever research he needs to do and shows up, kind of. And it may not be that dramatic. I mean, it definitely seems like the ball is in his court.
So a couple things there. So the first is that, the part about it's interesting you say about the Durant conversation piece with Kyrie, thinking that it's probably happened. And I hear what Adam was saying too, that the stance that the Nets can take now around the situation is much different than it was before. Like you mentioned him sitting out last year. Well, it's also not a coincidence that he kind of came back and played pretty quickly right after James Harden came to the Nets. Like it was, if you remember, that timeline sort of ended pretty quickly right around there when the trade happened. Then he came back. So I don't think, the coincidence around the trade and then the end of the holdout. Well, it's not a holdout, whatever he was doing I don't think it was coincidence there. The Nets sort of have a different, I think they have more latitude in this situation now, knowing that Kevin Durant is on the team for a long time. I think it seems like they can take a sort of, they can take a heavier hand, right? In the situation that they couldn't before. Kevin Durant's just on the team now. They're not worried about that piece of it. I think that the Kyrie piece, it seems like they can, I don't know if it's tough love or not. Do you think that with this, seeing how Kyrie has sort of acted and reacted to stuff like this in the past, I got worried that this actually, even though it seems so direct and so obvious, I think everyone agrees. There's no debate about how obvious the situation is. We all saw, anyone that follows NBA media saw this for what it was instantly with Woj and stuff. It was like, oh, this was, leaked. You use the word leaked. And I think that's correct. Can you see this situation sort of actually having the unintended effect of it actually makes it worse? Because he strikes me as maybe the one person where this kind of thing actually doesn't work. And, you saw what happened with Andrew Wiggins. It kind of worked, right? There was some internal, external pressure, and that situation for, whatever it is kind of cleared itself away. do you think that this situation deteriorates even more now? And then if it does, we can talk about like what that could mean, because I think some Nets fans might be kidding themselves that this is going to work itself out in short order. And I don't know if you agree with this. Like, this becomes increasingly unlikely to me that it does.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing it in the reflection of quotes and things that we're hearing every single day. Like, it just sort of, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't, maybe it's just the questions that are being asked every day, and you're getting different questions, and some of them are going to provoke answers. Like, I think Brian Lewis or somebody I think it was Brian Lewis yesterday, had a quote about Nash saying we're preparing not to have him there for home games. So maybe it is just questions that are getting asked, but yeah, I mean, I've totally thought about the risk, the adverse risk, where this is somebody that is really steadfast about what they believe in. And if they feel like that's being challenged and they feel like they're being coerced into doing something in a way that is kind of public, and we know how much Kyrie doesn't love media. I mean, I think it's very obvious that Kyrie does not love media, and leaking it to Woj, who, by the way, this should not be lost on really anybody, did the big disruptor piece in the bubble. The same guy that did that is who got the story for this Kyrie thing. I think they're playing with fire to a degree. There must be some confidence that this is going to be something that works, or it's just there are no other options right now other than just say, hey, we're just going to sit back and hope he walks in one day with a Band-Aid on his arm. You know what I mean? Like, I just, that's kind of been my read, because it just is not Netsy. It is not Netsy at all to go to the media and say, let's write a hit piece.
We had, I think we had made the joke about Kyrie could have literally been on his way to the local CVS, saw the article and was like, nah, bringing it right back home on this one, friends. Like,
I want to say one thing too, and then Adam can ask his follow-up, but it isn't lost on us too that last week at the beginning of the week we did a whole thing about how the Nets were the most stable organization in the NBA. Like, we spent so much time talking about it. We're very bullish. And I basically spent the whole time, most of it, just dumpstering all the other teams for being an absolute clown show around. Like, it was like the Rojas thing had happened, and like there was all this other stuff that had gone down, and we were just doing absolute victory laps about how great the Nets were and the KD extension and no drama. And then it was like that precipitated it was basically all downhill from the time we hit published on that podcast. Anyway, Adam, you can go ahead. Sorry, I know I interrupted you.
No. Some people say we're actually the cause of this entire circumstance. It's a Locked On Nets podcast that's actually been bringing this thing to its knees. But the other thing that you mentioned there about, okay, you're at this place, you're trying to drive this hard line, right? Steve Nash says we're preparing for him not to be available for home games. Then the next extension of this is this pressure that they're putting on him to be here for the full 82, obviously be available for home games, right? Will the Nets, do you think that the Nets would accept him not being there for home games? Is this the, ultimatum? Maybe this seems obvious, but either you're here for everything or you're here for none of it. Like, that does seem like the only intention you could have about taking this tactic with it is because that's the level of satisfaction here. You're either a part of it or you're not a part of it. And we're not going to stand here and say, well, there's KD and there's Harden, and, we're willing to massage and adjust our expectations on a case-by-case basis, because maybe we did do it last year and it didn't really get us the result that we wanted over the rest of the season and over the offseason. I don't mean on the court, just personality, communication, expectation, right? If basically Kyrie took that sample size and said, oh, okay, so that is where we're at here. I get to do what I want, and then I let you know when I'm ready to come back and play. I don't think that you can have that type of perspective now. If you're the Nets, you are drawing a hard enough line here where if you're going to push back on this at all, Kyrie, then maybe it is the world of, okay, this is it. Like, this is the end of the line here for you if you're not going to be all in on the full season.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's part of the motivation for the story that went to Woj, is like, you don't want to set the precedent of being like, you tell us what to do, we work on your terms. Like, you do have to take back your franchise. I think Mark Stein wrote that a little bit. You need to sort of set guidelines and boundaries for how you run your operation. And I think, like, this is not my reporting, I've just seen this all over the place, is that they do not seem like a team that's okay with him showing up for half the games. Like it's all or nothing. And I've seen that a couple places. I know Frank Isola said that on Sirius. I saw that on Twitter today. I don't know if that's true. I'm assuming it is though. So Twitter
doesn't
is
the
never
double
wrong,
down
so.
from Twitter's always on point, but doesn't also the sample size from Kevin Durant and then after acquiring James Harden, both of their personalities, like they don't particularly enjoy the media per se, but they show up, they do what's expected of them, and also they are both superstars who are willing to operate within the structure of the NBA. I feel like that is also the double down for the Nets, where they go, well, maybe we thought you make the deal with the devil and this is what you have to live with. And now they've actually gotten a sample that says, or maybe it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Adam's going to get aggregated for calling Kyrie Irving the devil, by the way.
Come back to bite me, but I'm willing to go for it. Feels like
it's a
like
saying, everybody. I know the thought I just put in your head. It's just saying, so everyone calm down. Sorry, Matt.
No, you're good. It's funny. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I'm really curious. I just don't think they can do the halftime thing, playing half his games, just because they don't want to run the risk of building resentment in the locker room. And you don't want to fracture the locker room just because of what one player, albeit a very important player, is choosing to do. It's just, you run the risk. Like let's say you have like James Harden coming out there who's like, look, I played on a freaking torn hamstring for this team. And there's another guy here that isn't here half the time, and we're just cool with that. It's too risky. I don't think you can do
Johnny
that.
show up for the last 2 weeks of the season and be like, here I am for a playoff.
And also, why is nobody talking about, I don't think you can play in playoff games either. Like he can't play in home games for the playoffs.
No.
That's
right.
insane.
Like,
that's insane. Your team is
and this
different.
is what we talked about. This is what we talked about. Like, Adam said before about the friendship piece and how friendship along competition is different than friendship that you go to the bar with on Friday nights and like throw some back and watch the game. Like these are not the relationships are different, right? Like they just can't, they can't go any other way. You don't need to have experienced these kind of relationships to know they're different. You'd be crazy to think that your relationship with your college friends is the same as NBA players who literally would step over each other to win a championship most times. That's why they exist at the highest levels of competition. They're able to kind of segment their heads out like this, right? And say, I can be friends with someone, but I can also see that, this situation is not helping me reach my ultimate goal, which is to win championships. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, that's why I think that people get discombobulated when they try to put their own friendship terms around guys who are the most competitive people in the world.
LeBron James traded Dwayne Wade. Like, we'll put it like that.
Yeah, well, he got in a fight with Chris Paul last year around union stuff. These guys are like supposed to be lifelong friends, and they took shots at each other in the media around how the season worked out. Right? This is just when it comes to championships on the line, this other stuff kind of gets thrown out. Let me ask you this. So here we're recording this Thursday, October 7th. I'm only saying the date here because if you catch this stuff later, this stuff changes so quickly that it's sometimes hard to know where, we said a few days ago the Nets had no problems, and now it seems like they're going to start.
I always loved Kyrie. Just to be clear, I just want to get that on tape.
What happens here? Like, okay, let's get this one out of the way. There's been talk of trades that have like the Nets. There's a certain segment of the Nets population. We have not talked about this at all in the podcast, for kind of good reason, but about if the situation does not resolve, right? And I'm going to call a resolution in this sense that Kyrie gets vaccinated. Like that's because that's what the situation is now. This is not an anti-vax or pro-vax stance. It's just like these are the rules in place, and one guy can't play, right? That's just kind of the long and short of it. What happens here if they just don't resolve? Then the Nash got asked, are they going to move practices? He was quick. He was so quick. No, we're not doing that, right? He couldn't answer that quick enough, like to say we're not making any. There's not going to be any concessions here. Let's say they get to the second game of the season and now they're headed back to Brooklyn, right? There's the first two games and then they're headed back to Brooklyn and he's not on the team. Are they going to entertain a situation where they even reach out to other teams in the league? It doesn't seem like that's even happened at this point, but do you think it even gets to that point? Because there's only so many, if you look at the decision tree about where this can go, there aren't that many there aren't that many branches. Yeah. Like
right.
there's really only 3 or 4 branches to this. Some are easier to get to than others, but is the trade branch an actually a realistic one, or is that just putting it way too the horse way in front of the cart? No, the other way around, the cart in front of the horse.
The horse, there's a cart and a horse somewhere. They're somewhere, and
they're doing something. They're right now they're hurtling down the hill at
someone just shot that horse and it's just tumbling down into the river.
Yeah. There's no horse nor cart right now. It's too early. I think they're just sort of again playing the waiting game to a degree, and letting him do what he needs to do to get to the point where that decision, they make a decision, because it just sounds like they have no idea what's going to happen. There's no idea if it's a yes, there's no idea if it's a no on vaccination. It's just, we're just sort of in limbo right now. So, but I think like if you reach a certain point in this, and I'm really curious, like, let's say he doesn't get vaccinated and they go on the road, right? For with the first 2 games, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Is he playing? Because he hasn't practiced really. Like, does he play? Are they just gonna be like, yeah, go ahead, go out there?
It's so funny. I just assumed he would. And see, in my mind, I'm kind of like pausing, because in my mind he was playing because the rules kind of said he could.
Right.
And now we're probably looking at a situation where, I think they have one road preseason game. They have a road preseason game against the Sixers. Yep. I believe is the last one. So maybe we take our sort of hot take marching orders from what happens around that, because that actually might be the best proxy for how they're feeling about the situation, right? Like if the other guys suit up and he doesn't, in a situation where he could play because the rules say that this is an okay situation. Like maybe that's where maybe that's like the next line of demarcation around what can actually happen here.
All right, we're going to get back to that conversation in just a second, but first, got to remind you about our friends over at betonline.ag, who want you to know they're back and they're better than ever. With the NFL and college football seasons well underway, betonline.ag wants you over on that website, where their new updated interface gives you even more odds, props, and contests, as BetOnline continues to be the #1 source for everything football. I'm actually over there right now watching the Brooklyn Nets championship odds take a slight hit as this Kyrie Irving situation unfolds. If you head over to the website on your laptop or your mobile device and sign up today, you can get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using promo code Locked On. It's a 50% welcome bonus just for signing up. First-time users, promo code Locked On. So if you're looking to get in on that action, from football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, you got to head over to betonline.ag. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And last but not least, got to remind you about our friends over at Built Bar. The fall is coming in here, and this is usually the time where I start to get a little comfortable, a little lackadaisical, cut back on the exercise, and uptick the old carbo loading. Why not go ahead and save yourself from that, as I'm trying to, by grabbing myself a Built Bar? They come in delicious flavors, as we've told you, like cherry barcia, double chocolate, salted caramel. That's the one that I'm on this week. And the best part is that these protein bars, they taste delicious. They don't have that weird protein bar texture, odd ingredients in them. No, my friends. You're going just calories from 130 to 180 per bar, just 4 to 5 grams of sugar and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. These are amazing flavors. They're all tasty and all healthy. As I said, you can get over to built.com right now and join me on the salted caramel train. And when you do, you can use promo code Locked On to get 15% off your first order. That's over on built.com. Promo code Locked On, 15% off your first order. Go enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives you the idea of like, is this guy around the team? Like, I think that's, to put it bluntly, if he's there.
It's clearly like he's not, though, right? I mean,
I don't know. Not at all. No, not at all. I mean, he can't even be in facilities. So, like, what is he going to do? Is he going to, if he was with them for San Diego?
Solidarity would be to stand outside the facility and just.
Yeah.
Wait that jumper, like that J in there looks good out the windows.
It's like in college when you leave your key-in card into the dorms. You just sort of wait out there and hope somebody's going to let you in.
I could just jump in there real quick. Do you then? So here's what I'll say. I'm not a very tinfoil hat kind of guy, but I thrown out this idea, whether it was maybe it was lucky that the draft went the way that it did, and maybe the Nets just looked at making their team better and made the acquisitions they did in the offseason, specifically at the guard position. But when you mentioned at the top that this goes back to last year, is there any world, whether it's by the fact that he happened to fall to them there, but now that you look at the backcourt and you say, well, we brought in a guy like Patty Mills, Bruce Brown in traditional role now going into this season, and you bring in a guy that at the very least can go on the court and looks like he's going to be able to score immediately at the NBA level in Cam Thomas. Do you think that plays into how the Nets are approaching this, just from the standpoint of, if this had happened last offseason, we'd feel very differently about the strength of this roster overall and the supporting cast. Coming into this year, it feels like the Nets are as deep as or deeper than any team in the league.
I mean, it helps. Like, I think even, but it'll just sort of shape what the season looks like. If he's not there, let's say he's not there, or let's say they get a player back in return, which I do want to get into. I'm going to make us get into some fake trades because, well, there's really only one, honestly, that I think we can talk about. But yeah, I mean, I think like a guy like Cam Thomas is actually like, I would be pretty disappointed.
Chomping at the bit for Kyrie not to show up so he can go ahead and ball out and maybe send a message like, I could do this if you needed it.
Talk about a winner from if anybody's a winner from all of this, it's Cam Thomas, who, I mean, if Kyrie never ever reports and we never get to a situation where he's, able to participate with the team, I want to see some Cam Thomas. I want to see him play next to Harden. I want to see him play around guys that make the game easier for him. That's what I want to see, because I think right now, like, he can just come in immediately and play next to it's funny. Like, Cam Thomas is one of those guys, you look at him, you say, oh, he's a scorer. He's probably a ball hog or whatever. And yeah, he's not a great passer right now. But I think if you put him next to somebody else where it's like James Harden's, getting into a pick and roll and he kicks to Cam Thomas, and the decision is simply take the catch and shoot or go to the rim and draw contact, that is perfect for him. And he is going to be elite at that already, even for his age. Like, he is going to be elite. And that's somebody I want to see. Like, I want to see him out there, and I think he can reasonably contribute right away. Will he give it back on the other end? Not sure. But at the very least, I think it's something that you're going to want to see a little bit. And I also think it'll really affect a lot of their rotations, a lot of how they run things. You think about the Nets last year, they're a team that they have James Harden run with the bench. And then you have Kyrie and KD run the show together. What does that look like now? You got to refigure out all these things. And that's why I kind of think like it's untenable to have Kyrie there half the time and not there half the time. It's just too much going on. Like,
you can't run two separate teams, right?
Crazy.
Like, you can't have, this is our home lineup and how we attack teams. And this is our road games where this player comes and inserts and is such a dominant, obviously high talent that you can't not have him be a focal point.
Right. It's untenable, really.
Who are you going to trade for? Anthony Simons? What were you thinking?
I can do the Ben Simmons thing because I think that's the one that's going around. And there's a lot of things that go into that. It's close enough to his home that maybe just being close enough to New Jersey, that's something that he'd be interested in. Maybe, because you have to look at teams that are nearby. Boston, I mean, I think we can cross that off pretty firmly.
Never say never.
Why?
Yeah, we don't need
why something happened.
Just logo,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of the one I look at, and they have a player I think in return that you could at least, I mean, let's put it bluntly, for an unvaccinated Kyrie Irving, if you get Ben Simmons back, that's pretty good. I actually talked to a couple, just been sort of sniffing around, like just what on the Philly side, what people think of that, and I think it's the idea of you having such a distressed asset. I hate labeling players that way, but for the sake of this argument, let's put it that way. A distressed asset in Ben Simmons. If you could get even 1 year of Kyrie Irving, let's say it's just 1 year for a guy that right now has no trade value, has no intention of showing up to camp, and may sit out the entire season. I almost think if you're Daryl Morey, you can talk yourself into saying, hey, we can play this guy at home, and maybe this is the year we need to take advantage of Joel Embiid's prime. I just went back and forth with people, and I got less pushback than I thought for, basically trading a guy that everybody in Kyrie that everybody says has no trade value right now.
Well, you haven't jumped into any of the comments about what it looks like from the other side of this, because it was an absolute S show coming on the other way about Ben. I will say there was a gross misunderstanding about Ben Simmons as a basketball player.
Yep.
He's been dragged pretty hard here. And he doesn't done himself any favors, I don't think, on this stuff. So I think some of it's warranted. But I saw one person like say that he would play like the Claxton role, and I was like, oh man, people have really, really not figured out what's going on here.
Hopefully he's in better shape.
They're trying to.
The crazy part about this is that we're even discussing. I mean, these are two storylines. The fact that they would even dovetail into each other around, you called it distress asset, and I think actually from a not just a strictly basketball perspective, that is correct labeling, right? You are talking about players whose clear value, related to their contract, and Kyrie doesn't have a contract, but what he would garner on the open market, which is clearly like a max salary, right? That they would even be in a situation where the situations have deteriorated so quickly that we'd even be discussing it. I mean, to me personally, the chances of that are like less than 1% for other reasons that even exist beyond just that the money maybe lines up and say maybe everyone's willing to take a risk. It's funny, actually. I think actually the biggest hurdle for both these teams, where they just wouldn't want to do it to someone they'd be competing with directly to get into the playoffs. I think it'd be almost too weird and everyone's brain would break. But it's just, I cannot believe on October 7th, we're even talking about the situation. And you actually have to bring it up because it's at least partially valid, because you're talking about a situation. We already know Simmons, he's not going to play with the Sixers. So that one's settled.
Yeah.
And I mean, short of a miracle. And with the Kyrie, the fact that we're even in a situation where you have to begin thinking about it, because the situation has clearly devolved to a point of, I don't think it's past the point of no return right now, because that's pretty far. Like the Simmons one is past the point of no return. They said as much, right? They said, I'm never playing here again. So I like that one's further down. That one's way further down the track. But the fact that it would even be entertained here is so crazy. And at some point you'd have to think that even discussing it is starting to probably wear, it will begin wearing on the team, especially for those that have to continue answering the questions like Harden and Durant and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's too early in a way to talk about it, but I think part of it is I just need to think about something else other than, wow, we're in limbo another day. Great. Like I don't know. I think so.
Let's talk about Claxton. No,
yeah. I'm going to save my Claxton thoughts. Let me give him a couple.
I appreciated your media day. I appreciated your media day follow-up question to your initial question to him, which I thought was fantastic. I've been bulking up. You're like, how much more do you think you've put on? He's like, it's probably the same weight, but I'm just saying, I feel like I'm getting bigger. I was like, man, I've never seen anyone actually walk themselves.
His confidence is up. Yeah.
Through the roof. I feel like I put on 20 pounds of confidence is really what's happening here. Would Kyrie retire? Like, is that a real thing?
That's what I just wanted to say.
Not even take away from the trade piece of it. Even like, obviously, you'd think if they were going to send him out to California or the Western Conference team to avoid what is an odd trade within the same conference that teams like to avoid. But do you think that if it gets to the place where the Nets are like, you're all in or you're all out, and Kyrie just says, then I'm all out, like that's it for me. We know, what he is off the court, and there's a lot of, by the way, maybe just to round out the perspective on him, Doug and I have said numerous times on the podcast, the things that this guy does away from the game that often goes undocumented, or sometimes people make sure to bring it up because it is so impressive and how generous he is with his time and his money. Like, as strange as he is, he can be a good dude. And is that side of his life maybe valuable enough or important enough to him that he just says, okay, I'll go do that then?
It could be. I mean, I think that's kind of the point they're looking to reach, is where, hey, are you in with us or are you out? And if you're out, are you out like playing this year? If that's not the case, because I think as much as there's all this stuff, does Kyrie love basketball? I think he likes playing basketball. I think he loves the big moments. I think a lot of that's overblown. And in a way, if they get to a point where it's like, this guy is not going to get vaccinated, he's not going to be able to participate with the team, I would call his bluff and trade and for a trade or something like that. Because it's like, I just, if he retires, I just don't know if he will. That's a huge decision. I mean, it's just, so I don't know. Any of
those options or scenarios, is he the same thing with Ben Simmons, right? When all this happened, everyone said, this guy doesn't have any value. It may be diminished, but you're not going to just give him away knowing what the talent is. Right now, is Kyrie Irving, do you think that other teams in any of these conversations would be saying, well, what's my guarantee here? Or, would the Nets have to be adding stuff into a pot potentially to say like, here's why it's worth it, because at least you get picks too in order to get this guy off the books, who very well may show up and then say, thanks so much, I'm not going to be a part of this team either.
I don't know how you get a read of the situation. I mean, the hardest part right now is like somebody needs to have contact with him. That would be step one. So you have to be another team with contact with him and have an idea. Hey, if I mean that you obviously you can't trade for a player and not know if he's not going to retire the next day. You know what I mean? Like it's the weirdest situation. I mean, I've definitely seen a lot of strange NBA things over the years. This is probably number one. I can't think of a situation where the team is almost landlocked into having to wait things out because of this threat of will he retire? Will he like whatever? Like it kind of hinders his value, and the fact that he is very clearly unvaccinated. And that's another thing that you have to get into. So those two things working together, along with him just being like, we don't have any idea if he's ever going to show up here and be able to do this.
I will say, we can close it out here in a sec, but there was another quote that came in from James Harden here. It's from Zach Brazilier from the New York Post. And he said, this is actually a little more definitive from Harden. So this makes me feel a little better. It said, it's not this, at least that there might be some communication, or that the team, at least the player side, is maybe there hasn't been a fracture. He said, it's not disappointing at all. I'm assuming he's referring to the situation. It's not disappointing. Kai believes what he believes, and his family's behind him. We're behind him. That's all that it is. So maybe the tales of the team demise might not be there. Again, it's one quote from one player. I'll say this. I hope very much that this podcast that we just did is completely irrelevant by tomorrow.
Me too.
Because like that would be the I know Adam and I are gonna probably have to switch topics here for another episode, just because we've done a few days on it. Want to thank Matt. I know we're gonna be, I think, up on Matt's feed as well. The clear out. So much appreciated to Matt to take the time for us to kind of do this joint podcast together. It's always good to get other people's opinion, especially someone as overly qualified as Matt is to kind of talk about the situation. Matt, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming on my show.
You better believe. Oh my God!
Real quick,
you guys are on my show. All right.
Adam and I took this. We all fist fought ahead of time about whose show was going on. There was actually no clear way. We all realized ahead of time that there was no clear way to have a hierarchy. So we all went on each other's show. Kumbaya, sat around.
There was a real chance that I was going to start my own podcast ahead of this one. I was going to bring in my own entirely unique show and say, no, this is a three-way
This
split.
is actually this is for one giant podcast. You're crossing up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Listen, it's always relevant. It's New York-based sports. Take this one to the bank, friends. How do you say we come in peace when the very words are an act of war? Peter Watts. There's something there right there. You know what I mean?
All right, Matt. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
And you're welcome.